We're here to talk about Zelda because, Alexa, your review for Zelda Majora's Mask is going live on the site tomorrow?
Tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific time.
Right. And when's it out? Like a week
That
from
comes
now?
out February 13th alongside the new Nintendo 3DS.
Excellent. Are you guessing you're embargoed to actually talk about that particular video game?
I can't really say much about it except that it is a Zelda game and you can't play it in 3D and it's Majora's Mask.
You can talk about Majora's Mask though, right?
Majora's Mask, I can't talk about Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask, for people that don't remember, is the weird Zelda game where the moon, speaking of the moon.
Good old moon.
The moon.
Tying it all back up. Except we cut the moon part out of this, probably, so it doesn't make any sense.
It's just a mystery.
Yeah.
The moon is falling out of the sky and Link has to save the world again and he has to relive this 72-hour span, like Groundhog Day, over and over and over and over, saving people, getting things right, liberating spirits from temples, typical Link stuff.
Wasn't it Groundhog Day like on Monday? They really
Yesterday was Groundhog Day.
They should have like maybe done a like thematic launch thing there. Just missed out
That
on
would
that
have
one.
been awesome.
Yeah,
Nintendo.
they should have done a takeover of the moon and made it have a real angry face. I feel like the moon isn't so much falling out of the sky as like face planting out of the sky, like with real intent.
I grew up playing Commodore stuff, so I was kind of my like big guilt in terms of games is not really getting like deep into Nintendo stuff, at least for a long time, until the GameCube. So the first Zelda I played was Wind Waker. So I'm I know. So I'm kind of interested in what you guys think is like your favorite Zelda game, and then maybe let's talk about what you think maybe like objectively what like the best Zelda
Don't even
experience
throw that
is.
word around.
Don't throw that.
Shouldn't
Don't
even
do
try.
that.
Peter, what's your favorite Zelda game? Because I know you've played all of them.
Almost all of them. I skipped some of the handheld ones, like the Oracle of Ages. And
Right.
Anyway,
Minish Cap.
yeah, I mean, like growing up though, my brother was much older. He owned a Nintendo. I couldn't help but be sort of thrust into Zelda, like the original, The Legend of Zelda, and that I think is for me, perhaps like my personal favorite game. It's a real close call between that and A Link to the Past. Both of those games are sort of, they fall within the classic Zelda formula before the series went to 3D, but they each have their own qualities that are really great. The original one, it was such like you didn't really have much context for what was going on. It was very mysterious, and you had this kind of an open world to explore and tackle it in your own way, and that was such like a interesting thing, especially back then. Like just that sort of that quiet like subtlety of like who knows what's happening.
This wide open adventure place. It wasn't like segmented into levels. I mean, there were dungeons, but you could just go all over the place.
Yeah.
And that kind of freedom was incredible. I mean, people would like make maps. You would draw a map to keep track of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of that mystery worked against it in some ways, because I remember being over a friend's house and they just like navigate like 4 screens over, 3 screens up, and then there's this bush that's like the 5th from the center on the, and then like that's like a crucial part to getting through the game. How are you ever gonna find that if you don't have someone to tell you? Like that just like for me is so aggravating.
Is it a game you think you can go back, like I could play for the first time in 2015 and enjoy it, or do you enjoy it because of its time and place in like your own gaming history?
I think you could go back and enjoy it, but as Chris was saying, it can be a bit cryptic, right? Like there are moments, like even just the little messages that you read from people, they're likely to confuse you more than they are to give you any sort of useful knowledge. But that said, I think it stands the test of time as like a great overhead 2D adventure game.
Alexa, what's your favorite Zelda game of all the ones you've played?
You said you started with Wind Waker.
Yes.
That was your first?
Yeah.
I love Wind Waker. Wind Waker, I think, is my favorite Zelda game. There's something about being able to explore this enormous, vast world, and having all of that water made it feel much bigger than it probably already was. And riding around in this like sassy boat and just like figuring out like, oh, there's like another culture over here on this island doing one thing, and then there's another culture over here. And it really felt like I feel like this world is lived in and has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. I also like the way the game is segmented. There's sort of 3 parts to the game, where in the beginning you're sort of figuring out, oh, I'm the hero of time and I'm the kid. And then the third part is, the fetch quest where you collect the things and awaken the Temple of Time or wherever the king is. And then there's the latter half where like the poop has hit the fan, and it's sort of this sense of urgency of, I have to save Zelda and I have to save the world. And I really like the way that it's this sort of slow, dramatic build-up, and then it gives you all these things to explore in the meantime. It just felt big and amazing.
I really enjoyed Wind Waker, but because I hadn't played any of the older ones, I kept hearing from people that like it's not super popular in like Zelda circles, and I always wondered, was I missing something? Like, what was it about? Did you enjoy Wind Waker, or like?
I definitely enjoyed it. I think originally the bigger complaint was the fetch quest at the end that you were talking about, the Triforce fetch quest. That's a big pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Just the repetition involved, right?
Yeah, and even some of the sailing, for all its great qualities, was also a bit boring at times.
I think the biggest backlash against Wind Waker was for that art style. People were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's like a cartoony, kiddie Zelda." After and so after Ocarina of Time, after Majora's Mask, which seemed to sort of cue you up for something more like Twilight Princess, like that darker, like a more realistic looking Zelda.
Nintendo had showed a demo, like before the GameCube was out, of a very like realistic looking Zelda game.
And then this came
and
out.
so people were hyped for that.
Surprise.
And I personally loved Wind Waker's art style, and it definitely ranks among my favorite. But I also really liked Twilight Princess.
Really?
Twilight Princess is good.
That's one that not a lot of people like. I mean, certainly GameSpot got a lot of crap for it. I think Jeff gave it an 8.9. I liked. I thought it was great because the character of Midna was like a companion character who was really interesting, and also the villain in Twilight Princess was like a legit kind of villain, not just like I'm Ganon, I'm the one who's always been the villain, I'm gonna turn into a giant pig demon and like it was similar to the villain in Skyward Sword in that they were a little weird. They were a little bit unknown, but had personality in a real interesting way.
Yeah.
Let's take a little moment before we talk about perhaps the best one to talk about. What are the games that I should stay away from? If I'm going into the back catalog of Zelda, is there anything that I should like stay the goddamn hell away from that I might think, oh, this looks interesting or neat?
There are the obvious candidates. I think we all know the CDI Zelda games.
Oh, yes.
No, those are fabulous. Please play those.
Oh my god.
What were they called? Was it two of them?
No, there's 3. They're not fabulous. Give
Look
me a
at
break.
that.
They're bad.
They're horrible. They're not fun. There's nothing redeeming other than the fact that they're utter shit.
They're bad and they're wonderful because they're horrible.
Oh,
look at this.
Don't play the game. Just watch these clips.
You can find them on YouTube. Someone like cut them into a compilation.
Just do that. Save your.
It's just amazingly bad.
What does the gameplay like?
There's some like really bad platforming.
Oh,
Here you
shit.
go.
It's terrible.
I love this like French version of this we have.
This looks like an episode of Nick Arcade. Like that's what it looks like.
Yo,
With,
hit
like,
that
wizard in the middle.
Hit that wizard.
Where could you even play this? I guess you would emulate it.
Yeah,
you
you
have
can
to-
burn CDI games.
You
There's
play
no
it
copy
on
protection.
your CDI that you still own, Chris.
Oh god, I did play it on a CDI thanks to Peter. He brought one in.
Nope.
Or some. We had one in the office, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
We had one in the office. Peter set it up, and it's awful. Like the hit detection was all over the place. Projectiles would just disappear. It's no good.
What a shame. It looks all right for a game that came out in 1993, right? Right?
No.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, like what? Do you
No.
think it looks pretty?
It's an experience.
What I actually found interesting about you talking about Wind Waker was that was a game that people were up in arms about graphics in terms of, like, we just did some B-roll for it there, 2015. It looks pretty great.
Yeah.
Those GameCube games, like that whole era.
Well, that
still
was
looks
the
pretty.
HD remaster. Let's be fair.
Oh yeah. Okay,
Yeah, but
that's a good
that
point. 16 by
art
9 as
style
well.
holds up super well as opposed to the art style of Ocarina, which that does not hold up well. Like that game looks really pretty bad when
It's
you
pretty
go
good
back
on the
to
3DS though. Like
it.
that version
The
was
3D
great.
version is great. Like
Yeah.
they really livened it up in terms of the detail, the character. Like that's the version to play. Like don't try to play the N64 version again.
Yeah.
Chris, what's your favorite, or what do you think is the best of all the Zelda games? If I could only play one, what would
If
it
you
be?
could only play one,
Because I'm a jerk. I've got minutes to live. No, I've got like 80 hours left to live, and I can
feel
only
like
play one Zelda game.
If you could only play one, you should get your 3DS and play A Link Between Worlds.
Yeah.
Because that not only is a phenomenal game in and of its own right, but it has these some real clever mechanics in it, but it also harks back to what many consider to be the best Zelda game, A Link to the Past, which was the Super Nintendo Zelda, which I never got proper chance to play, and still haven't sought it out, much to my great personal shame. But that one, this sort of evokes that in its style and in the way that its world is built, but makes some really neat sort of innovations in terms of the openness of the world and the way you move between the two worlds.
Excellent. And of course, GameSpot's Game of the Year for 2013 it was as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
Alexa, what do you think? What is the one that I should play if there was only one to play?
Only one?
Yeah.
I would have to say Link to the Past, actually. It's just like, it makes you feel smart. Like Chris was saying about finding that fifth bush and the whatever. It makes you feel smart. I think it's a very well put together puzzle game. It's fun, and also there's just enough there, but just enough not there that you can sort of really use your imagination and like dig into it. And I kind of like that it does a lot with only very little visually.
Excellent. Peter, we're going to get a hat trick for A Link to the Past, or are you going to step out?
A Link to the Past, but for
right.
different reasons. I think the way that game sets up the entire story with, Link is sort of in this little shack with his uncle. The uncle has to go to the castle because something's afoot, and then Link is kind of concerned, so he follows suit, finds his dying uncle. The uncle passes on the sword. Like, you kind of just infiltrate this castle, and then suddenly, like, you're sort of responsible for, yes, saving the princess, the damsel in distress, but you sort of get this quest, like, just kind of given to you, and you sort of start off like the other Zelda games, right? Like, you beat a couple palaces, dungeons, whatever, you get some pendants, and then the game is like, oh, by the way, there are two worlds. I guess you missed that part. Yeah, no, there's not just one world, there's two. So that moment, especially for me, was when that game kind of just took off. Like, great start, great middle, and then the ending is a pretty dramatic boss battle that I thought was great as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it. That's our consensus, I guess, for the best Zelda game, if you only have 80 hours left to live or something. If you have your own thoughts, which I'm sure you do, please put them in the comments below, and let's start that discussion right now.